we talk a lot about financial literacy, right? And we understand that the foundation of financial literacy is just about you understanding money, understanding credit, understanding business and entrepreneurship and investing and wealth building. So the basis or the foundation of financial literacy is just about you understanding these principles and concepts that are all tied to what we call financial literacy. Well, when it comes to financial maturity, it's a little different than financial literacy. I actually believe we have people, especially in today's world, who are, for the most part, financially literate, but they're really not financially mature. And so one of the things that I've been working on doing with my clients, with my students, with even my investors and partners and people that I work close with, is to not just help them become financially literate, because I think we kind of got that figured out, but to help them become financially mature. So I want to make sure that you understand the fundamental difference between the two, okay? Financial literacy is just about you understanding these principles and concepts, but financial maturity, I'm gonna give you a proper definition of it, and then I'm gonna give you more of a common version of what financial maturity is. So financial maturity measures the sophistication of your financial process. Okay? Financial maturity measures the sophistication of your financial process. So when you are financially mature, what you're saying is the measure of your financial process is mature. So it's not just about you understanding finance. It's not just about you understanding credit and money and business and entrepreneurship and investing and wealth building and economics. It's about you taking that understanding and elevating your understanding to a place to where you now have a sophisticated process that you use because of your understanding of money, okay? So you can be financially literate. You can have an understanding about money and credit scores and entrepreneurship and business, but your financial literacy doesn't automatically translate into or transfer into financial maturity, because financial maturity measures the sophistication of your financial process. And most people who learn about money and business and finance and entrepreneurship and all those things, they don't really have a financial process. They really have not put together a process that allows them to grow and mature financially. So even though you know a lot about money, you understand a lot about these things, but you don't see no change, okay? Here's a more common way of explaining financial maturity. It is your ability to use financial resources correctly, okay? So when you are financially mature, when you have elevated your financial maturity, you have basically developed this ability to use financial resources correctly. So think about it. If you have certain financial resources, which we all do, and you understand what those financial resources should be doing, that means you have some level of financial literacy. But when you are able to use those financial resources correctly, you're not just financially literate, you are now financially mature, okay? So there's an old saying, when you know better, you do better. You ever heard that? When you know better, you do better. Well, most people who know better don't necessarily do better. You know why? Because just because you know better, you still have to develop the ability. You got to build the muscle to actually do better. So a lot of people talk about it, but they're not being about it because they don't understand knowing and doing are two separate things. Just because you know, that don't mean you gonna do. Doing requires development. Doing requires habits. Doing requires discipline. Doing requires repetition. So that means if I know about money, but when I get money, I don't do what I know to do with money, guess what? I'm not financially mature, and I would really question your financial literacy. I hope that makes sense to everyone, okay? So now, elevating your financial maturity means that you want to elevate your ability to use financial resources correctly. How do you actually elevate your financial maturity? Well, you elevate your financial maturity by elevating your ability to use financial resources correctly. So on the screen, this is just my own version of this diagram, but on the screen, I'm showing you on one end, you have low financial maturity, and this is a real concept. And then on the other end, you have high financial maturity. And so the goal is for you to go from low financial maturity to high financial maturity. How do you actually do it? Well, doing that is not just about you becoming financially literate or learning more about money, learning more about credit, learning more about business, learning more. It's not just about learning more, okay? In order for you to go from low financial maturity to high financial maturity, you have to develop. Let me write this down. You have to develop the ability. This is hard. The ability to use financial resources correctly. That's where the work is. See, people get all caught up and tied up in learning. Most people don't even want to learn. I have a whole university training platform with thousands of video lessons on all of this stuff regarding financial literacy and financial maturity. And most people don't even want to sit down and learn or take an hour or two every day and educate themselves. So most people don't even want to do that, including business owners, including so-called CEOs, including leaders, including those who want to be wealthy and who want to become millionaires, but they're too intellectually lazy to actually learn. So if they're not even willing to learn or to develop the ability to learn, they will never develop the ability to use financial resources. So this is why people mismanage money. This is why people mismanage credit. This is why people mismanage business, mismanage opportunities, mismanage deals, mismanage investments, mismanage relationships. Not because they don't really know about those things, but because they have not developed the ability to use those things correctly. Hopefully what I'm saying you are understanding, because I want to show you how do you develop or elevate your financial maturity, or in other words, how do you develop the ability to use financial resources? Well, first of all, you have to understand what financial resources we're talking about. And I'm going to give you an example of a few of them. But once you identify with these financial resources, you need to now understand them better or understand them correctly, and then you have to develop the ability to use them correctly. So for example, we have on one end of the spectrum, low financial maturity, and then on the other end, we have high financial maturity. Let me give an example of some financial resources that are considered low financial maturity resources. Look at this, cash. Cash is considered a low financial resource. It is a resource that people with low financial maturity build their life around, just cash. That is considered a resource under low financial maturity. Credit Everybody be running behind credit. I need an 800 credit score. I need to get me a line of credit. That's actually a low financial resource. Entity structure. Now, they are necessary when you are building this high financial ecosystem, but they ain't everything. That's why some people get stuck here. So when I'm talking to people and they always talk about, man, I ain't got no money. Man, my credit tore up. I need me an LLC. I already know they're talking from a low financial IQ. And I say that respectfully because I used to be that person. I used to be the person who always talked about how little money I got, how my credit ain't right. You know, I ain't got the right LLC and the right paperwork. Bruh, sis, that is not the determining factor that's going to get you to success. It may play a role in the bigger picture of what you're doing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the difference maker. So cash is a financial resource, but it is a low financial IQ financial resource. Credit is a financial resource. Having the right entity structure is a part of your financial resources. So do we want to check these off to make sure that we understand them to keep elevating our financial literacy? Yes. But just because you understand cash, credit, and entity structure doesn't mean you have a high financial maturity. Why? Because understanding them and developing the ability to use them correctly are two different things. So now I've got to develop the ability to use cash correctly. I got to develop the ability to use credit correctly. I got to develop the ability to use entity structures correctly. That's why I teach about holding companies and special purpose vehicles, divisions, subsidiaries, because you have to know how to use them correctly. Just because you go set up 5 LLCs don't mean you are using entity structures correctly, because you have to understand concepts like the holding company. And so here I put leverage in the middle because this would be considered like mid-level financial maturity. Okay? This would be considered mid-level because when you're able to use leverage as a financial resource, it's not just cash that you're leveraging. Sometimes it has nothing to do with cash. It's not just credit that you're leveraging. Sometimes it has nothing to do with credit. It's not just a business entity that you're leveraging. Sometimes it has nothing to do with it. Because when you have another level of financial maturity beyond the lowest level, you realize that even when you don't have cash, credit, or a business structure, you can still leverage other resources to get you to where you want to go. Okay? And what I'm saying, not only do I know it's true, I have done it and I have taught other people to do it. But again, giving you information, giving you a course or a program or educational class doesn't mean you're going to do it. Because in order for you to do it, you have to develop the ability for it. You got to build a muscle. Just because I give you a football or a basketball and put a uniform on you, it don't mean you going to catch the ball. It don't mean you going to run the touchdown. It don't mean you going to make a free throw. Because now with the ball and the uniform, you still got to go to practice. You still got to learn the playbook. You still need a coach. You still got to play with other team members. You may have to sit on the bench and pass water around and throw towels at everybody who's in the game until you qualify to actually do it, because now you have the ability. So when you start moving over towards the high financial maturity spectrum, now you are understanding and developing the ability to use investment vehicles. So I know some people who are W-2 employees who skipped all of these and jumped right to investment vehicle. Okay? Now here I put these two just to give an example of what high financial maturity resources look like. So we have investment vehicles. This could be stocks. It could be business acquisitions. It could be a lot of different things. Private equity. You have M&A, which is short for mergers and acquisitions. That's when you move more into that private sector space, even public sector. And IPOs is like an initial public offering, which doesn't necessarily have to mean you are doing an IPO on the stock exchange, but the concept of how an IPO works in terms of an exit strategy and a pivot into another financial stratosphere, the concept of that, it is centered around an IPO. So I just showed you the layout of how the diagram for this spectrum looks between low financial maturity and high financial maturity. So how do you elevate your financial maturity? Well, first of all, you need to have an understanding of all of these things. It's a lot you got to learn. Okay? So that means you got to be around the right people. You do have to educate yourself. You got to learn. You got to grow. Most likely you're going to have to pay for courses. You're going to have to pay for coaching. Even if you don't buy my courses and pay for my coaching, fine. Okay, it is what it is. But you got to pay for something. Either you're going to pay with money and time, or you're going to just pay with time, which is money. So that means you're going to just deep dive into Google and YouTube and other platforms. Most likely some of these things on this side, you're not going to learn on reels. You're not going to learn watching shorts or TikToks. I say that respectfully. You're probably not going to learn a lot of this stuff and the layers of this stuff that are high financial IQ that are about high financial maturity resources unless you're an insider, unless you're around the right people. It is what it is. Okay? Most of the stuff we learn about on social media is down here about cash, credit, LLCs and stuff, most of which doesn't really move the needle for you to get to a place of success. So I hope what I just explained to you makes sense. I only try to take 30 minutes a day, Monday through Friday, to come live and to share just incremental pieces of data with you to just open your mind, inspire you, encourage you, educate you, but more important, challenge you to make a different decision today. And sometimes that decision is to become a different version of you. Stop following the same path based on limiting beliefs and limited information and ego and pride, and just rid yourself of that. Strip yourself of that and say, you know what? Today I'm going to reset my mind. I'm going to reset my life and I'm going to do something different. And again, it may mean you need to be held accountable. You need a coach. You need a mentor. You need to be in a community of people. All that stuff has helped me become who I am. Okay? I can't take at least all the credit. I might give myself a little credit for some of the things I did. I'm going to give God the glory now. Let's keep it a buck. God gets all the glory. We're going to check that box. To God be the glory. He gets all the glory, at least for my life and for my success. But humanly speaking, I'm going to give myself credit for what I am willing to show up and do every day. I'm willing to educate. I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to grow. But I also have to give other people credit because I surround myself with people that hold me accountable, that challenge me, that teach me, that show me how to take whatever it is that I have in mind and make it better. And you got to be willing to do the same thing. You don't want to be on this wealth building journey alone. But I'm telling you, you want to learn how to elevate your financial maturity. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put the questions in the comments. Let me know. I wanted to at least share a little bit with you about one of these high-level conversations that I have been having with a lot of my students and clients. investors and partners, and